everyone, and welcome back. Today, we are talking to Michael Raymond, who is a senior writer with the Walt Disney Company, and he has won many different awards, including Austin Film Festival. He's been a finalist at the Academy Nichols, and he currently has a screenplay under option called Glow Stick. Welcome, Michael.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be here, and hello to everyone, and hello, Barb.
So tell us how you got started in the business. Why did you decide that you even liked screenwriting at all?
In the business, yeah. I mean, I've always had a thing, for writing, like a calling that I suppose everyone has that perhaps. And when I moved to the West Coast after university years, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I always knew I wanted to have some form of creative expression, so I was just searching, and short fiction, took a little dabble in that, wrote lyrics for a friend's rock band, and there was just something about movies I've always loved. And I think somewhere along the way, I just took a class, an evening class at Long Beach State, back in the day when I was living sort of in the Long Beach area. And that kind of started the ball rolling. I mean, I was just in love with, like everyone, that experience of sitting in the dark and seeing moving motion pictures. And I wanted to create something that I could look back on someday and say, yeah, that's a story. It's a story that I told. And
Because Glow Stick is a screenplay that you wrote that is currently under option. Okay, it's about an awkward teenage misfit who jeopardizes his future and alienates himself in the local community when he claims that a magical glow stick allows him to see and talk to his best friend who was recently killed in a tragic accident. So
oh,
tell
by
us,
the way,
yeah, tell us about
yeah.
this project and how you got it optioned.
It's kicked around, and I've rewritten it a few times over the years. I think you might have looked at it a number of years ago
Yes.
and had some very positive, complimentary things to say about it, which also blew me away. Like, oh, what have I got here? But it's loosely based on personal experience, a loss at a very young age that I had, and it's basically about grief and death and things that a subject matter you'd think, oh my God, we're gonna get heavy and go down the rabbit hole on that. But I think the challenge for me, and what ultimately ended up being the finished script, was I wanted to find a way into that subject matter and that story that could provide some avenues for a comedic relief, if you will, or at least having that balance and a lighthearted way to kind of deal with a very heavy subject. But even though there's still some heavy stuff in the film, or at least in the envisioned film. And I think when I found the hook with this glow stick sort of as my MacGuffin, and it's your suspension of disbelief, like Jimmy Stewart seeing the invisible rabbit in Harvey, or um, elements of Lars and the Real Girl, or in that to some extent. That's a different kind of film. So it was basically a way for me to kind of get through something that has haunted me for 40 some years, I guess, this loss as a young person, because I think as young people, something like that, nobody has a playbook for an 18-year-old when you have such a personal loss, and I'm sure, so there's universal themes with, whether it's a parent or anything else like that. So the glow stick was the way in with a little magical realism. And I'm happy to say that it has resonated with a few people that want to champion this, and hence the option agreement.
Now, how did you get the option? I mean, what was your starting base? Were you querying? Were you a
I
personal contact, or how did you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I was querying. I'm unwrapped at the moment. So I mean, and over the years I've been wrapped in like a lot of your writers and your community. In nature of the business, we kind of go through those trials and tribulations of relationships of a business nature. But I was querying, and I think I used an online service as a way, because as we know, cold queries are kind of a hard way to go.
Sure.
Necessary evils for unproduced or unrepped writers. And through one of my queries, someone said, send it over. Message to everyone. Not everything has to end in a dead end. That was sort of the genesis of how this relationship started, and getting the option agreement. And we're a year and a half into it. We renewed the option as well, and we just found it looks like we have a director attached right
All
now.
right.
So
Right.
that's yet another step in this merit. Like, well, I'll talk to my mother and she'll get all excited, and I'll say, now, it's like mile 5 of a 26-mile run. I'd like I'd like to see something realized and made and on the screen like anyone. So
Now you have won, and I hope I get them all, but you have won the Page Award, the Scream Festival Award, the International Film Festival, Family Film Festival, excuse me, the Seattle International Film Festival, the Austin Film Festival for the Dark Horse Studios Sci-Fi Award, and you were a finalist in the Academy Nicole Nichols Fellowship. So has any of those helped you with your queries, or is there any one in particular you'd like to talk about?
probably the one is what I refer to as the gift that keeps on giving is definitely the Nickel Finalist Award, and and I should qualify that it's not an award as such because the actual Nickel Fellow is I was
Oh,
a
right.
finalist, yeah, and then but nevertheless, it has such a high regard in the industry
Mhm.
that if I'm querying or I'm in a conversation, I lead with that. I always will often say I'm a Nickel finalist writer, or to some extent. It's like right out of the gate
Right.
because it gives you a little bit of validation, and right or wrong, that kind of helps because I can raise my hand and say, hey, I'm a really good writer, and I don't think anyone I have conflict of interest. But if I can say, well, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, they think I'm pretty good too, and unless you think I'm a one-trick pony or a hack, but so that helps. So definitely the Nickel. I don't have what would amount to hardware for the Nickel other than a nice photo and all that good stuff.
Right.
I will say now for that darker sci-fi, for Screenfest, and I'll take my Disney badges off. This skull was they called. I didn't make it down for the award, and they said, "Hey, we
Ah,
need to set
that's,
you won." They said you won, and you need to come and get it, or
I
we'll
love
send
that
it.
one.
We'll
You
send it
gotta
to you. And
you
I
gotta
thought,
do a
well,
selfie with that. You have to do a selfie with this one. I love it.
well, and here's the foot, and I'm bearing the lead a little bit. This was designed by the late great Stan Winston, who is
Oh,
our
okay.
creature extraordinaire dude, right? That everyone kind of holds, up here. I had no idea, and I had
Wow.
certain. This is heavy. It's made a few moves over the years, so it's falling off its pedestal.
It's
Uh,
totally cool. I love it.
when
Not
the
for
kids
Halloween
were
only, any day of the year.
when the kids were a little younger, my mother said, that's going to frighten them. I said, are you out of your mind? They think it's the coolest thing in the house.
Now they're all going to become writers just because of that statue.
Now, not to be outdone, I will say, as far as like a cool award and not the Mickey statue, that's for my day job, just being at Disney for a long time. But the bronze, and this is free advertising, I guess, for the bronze typewriter from Austin, I think is pretty cool as well.
Oh
And
yeah, I like that one. That's
yeah,
neat.
I do like this, and it's got a nice bit of weight to it.
That
So
was really cool.
it is pretty cool. I have a day job at Disney, and this is just Mickey Sorcerer. It just represents that I've been there 15 years. So I didn't really
Yeah.
earn. Yeah,
And you are a senior writer at Disney. So tell us about that. Tell us about your
yeah,
what's
I am. So it's kind of a traditional day job sort of gig, but obviously it's for the Walt Disney Company, so that like raises eyebrows immediately. My work there is I'm on a small internal communications team,
Mhm.
and there is a Seattle office that has about 800 people that work for the Walt Disney Company. And like a lot of writers, we have day jobs, and mine happens to be with Disney. And even though I'm sitting up in Seattle, so that's a kind of a cool gig to have. I work with some great people, and
Okay, so I want to talk to you about your stories in terms of when you talked about your story. I noticed you do something that a lot of writers don't do. You talked about the theme of your story and how it revolved around your development of the story. And that's one of the things that caught my attention about your screenplays is they're heavily themed. Like you didn't tell me about the character or get into all the details of their story. Do you tend to start with a theme? Because I notice very heavy themes with your screenplays.
boy, that's a loaded question. More often than not, I think that is true. That it's sort of what kind of space and emotional space do I want to play in with this particular story? And as I begin to develop characters, sometimes that'll speak to me a little bit more. But I am a little heavier on theme. It's taken years of developing the craft. I used to overwrite so much, and because that took a long time for me to realize that less is best, and for a number of reasons. Is not only you want to capture the reader and have a fast read, but sometimes just it adds a little bit of enrichment to a story if you can find better ways to visually convey something without. I mean, I can write a novel if I want to go write a novel. I'll go write a novel,
Right.
but heavy on the theme for sure. And I tend to go. I've been going into some dark spaces lately, and I'm not sure why that is. It's interesting because and some of those themes maybe just speak to me a little bit more.
Well, tell me
Yes.
what is your actual writing process when you sit down? Do you outline it? Do you brainstorm it? I mean, what's your process to get to that polished, finished script?
Yeah, I'm a big outliner. And but even getting to the point where I'm comfortable starting to outline takes a little bit of pain. And so I'll be all over the map on who the people are that are going to populate a particular world. I tip my hat to anyone who just has that light bulb come on and go, I've got a great idea for a story, and one of those that'll write itself. Because how many times I'll hear about a premise or a log line, and it's like, why did I mean, well, do this? Why didn't I think of that? Instead, I labor over these kind of heavy things where I do want to take someone on a journey, and it's not just the audience, it's certainly going to be a protagonist, and I want that character arc to be rather defined, that we're going to kind of go along for the ride. And so the theme is going to kind of inform just about every single decision that I'm going to make, even at the beginning process through the outline, because I want every scene and every moment to kind of hark back to the theme of the story and the premise, obviously in a very elegant way that
Right.
we don't signpost it or kind of hit you over the head and say, all right. And look, I've been as guilty as anyone of kind of overdoing it with dialogue. And I mean, I'll see certain filmmakers in a scene, and I just marvel at the minimalism sometimes, and it's like, why can't I think of the same scene where I would have had all this blah 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 going on, and it's like they just did it in two sentences or a look. And
Or just a visual, yeah. Just the powerhouse
yes,
of the visual subject.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a departure from your original question, but it's kind of that gumbo soup that brings it all together anyway. But the real short answer is yes, I do outline. I kind of do it. I don't do the on the wall with cards anymore. I kind of tend to do it on my. I figured out a way to kind of replicate that.
On the
I know
computer.
everyone probably just uses Final Draft or something like that, but
And I had a producer in this business years ago told me something that how producers look at a script. And he said he should be able to remove every piece of dialogue and still know what your story is about.
yes.
If he can't do that, it's not a motion picture. It might be television, it might be something else, but it's not a motion picture. So since you have an option script, tell me what would be your advice to writers? Because they're always asking me about what do I do to market? Is there any advice you would give them on the marketing end of the business?
There's some online services that can kind of help get that foot in the door. I realize that everyone has an opinion on contests. And if you're an unknown writer and maybe you're not sitting in LA or in Long Beach or even up and down the West Coast, they do serve a purpose. Get a sense for whether or not you're starting to deliver on whatever that promise is you think you're making to an audience and to yourself. So contests can help validate you a little bit, and in a best case scenario, is what's happened to me on occasion. It can give you some opportunities that you can seize on if you get that exposure. Because I only entered competitions for the exposure. I never, someone might say, oh, you win $500 if you play, the money never was irrelevant to me. It was all about exposure and
Right.
networking. Um, I actually, not to put a plug in for the Austin Film Festival, but I know that that's a good place, and it's expensive sometimes to go there to get energized, because there's a writing element to that festival, as I think many of us know, and there can be a lot of networking opportunities there, and also the panelists and the discussions. And I think all of these probably take place in the LA area anyway to some degree.
So tell me your experience there. Did you talk to producers, agents, managers? Did you get some good connections, or how did you find that when? Because you've actually attended the film festival. So tell
Yeah,
us.
it's all happenstance too. I mean, sometimes you could be ordering a drink at the bar and you're standing next to someone who, is a line producer for Breaking Bad and down in Albuquerque, and they're in town. I mean, I think Vince Gilligan showed up to collect an award, one of those Browns typewriters one year, and I hadn't even been watching Breaking Bad yet, and I was at the luncheon ceremony. I thought you know, it's kind of a faux pas, so I need to get caught up here. I think also it helped me. One of the first years I went, the last thing I was expecting was to win. I'm not like being overly modest about it, but you don't ever expect those things. And so I think that brought some attention to me a little bit. And so I didn't have to necessarily, you know, tap someone on the shoulder and say, how, you got your little lanyards and all that good stuff. So I did have connections coming out of there, people that wanted to read the material, just networking in general. And I met all walks of the industry. It could have been producers, independent film directors, even some acting aspiring actors and actresses. Sometimes what people have to do too, though, is you've got to read the room a little bit. So if it's a social setting and you're connecting with someone, I don't think anyone would do this, but like you're not going to hand them a script on the spot, right? But you're going to be respectful and gauge how they may want you to interact with them in terms of a, hey, let's stay in touch kind of thing, or however those relationships are formed, because I get hung around the word relationship more than networking sometimes. I think you build relationships, and that even maybe that's the same thing as networking. I think having relationships really helps in that industry down there. And you never know when they further down the road, someone goes, oh yeah, I remember your writing, or I remember reading something by you, or remember we talked in Austin.
Okay, so the current script that you are promoting is the Academy Nicole finalist. It's called Abilene. And let me see if I got your log line here. It's about a free-spirited and cynical young woman seeking redemption. There's that theme from a recent tragedy by confronting her three biggest fears: a new romantic interest, her mother, and herself. Nice, because you have your external conflict, your internal conflict wrapped into one log line. So tell us what you're doing right now to promote this project.
Oh, we got serious internal conflict on this one. Yeah, I joke this is part of my death trilogy, because Glow Stick deals with grief and Abilene is redemption. Um, I'm working with a local filmmaker in Seattle who's a director and has something of a track record, and so he's taken a shine to Abilene, as a lot of people have. So kind of expand on that log line a little bit. Abilene is a script I wrote a number of years ago. It was one of those the heck with it scripts. I'm going to write this little character driven dramedy. I know it's not high concept, and I remember a producer on a phone who liked all of my stuff, but he passed on all of it. And when I explained Abilene to him, he said, don't waste your time writing something like that. And I understood why he said that. I was not offended. We didn't have the streaming 10 years ago when I first wrote Abilene, and I kind of dusted it off, which is why kind of pushing it with this filmmaker. And so it was a little kitchen sink drama, like Ordinary People kind of thing. And I don't know for the life of me how it just weaved its way through the gauntlet that is the Nickel Fellowship, competition, because to emerge from a pile of 7,000 scripts and be one of the final 10 was immensely gratifying, but also shocking and astonishing. So that's Abilene kind of in a nutshell. It's with a female protagonist that would be a really juicy role for a breakout actress in her young 20s. That's how a former manager used to pitch it anyway. And eventually I'm promoting it with my fellow filmmaker. But I've told him too, I said, look, because he goes off on his other projects, that if I ever have another opportunity that is a little more divergent and maybe LA based, I just wanted him to understand that I would want him to be part of it. But I don't know how, it's a handshake agreement amongst friends that if I had an opportunity to get it made without him, that I'm free to pursue that. So it's a little story that it'd be great to find a home for one of these days. I think it could be on a streamer. It could be
definitely a streaming platform.
The gift that keeps on giving is the Nickel finalist script that I was told not to write. So there's a message in there somewhere, because
life is ironic. Yeah,
I broke the rules. I probably did something that isn't the most sage thing to do for a writer, and write something that is hard to sell.
The last thing you expect to sell is the first thing that does. So now,
Yeah.
Michael, I thank you for being with us today, and I really appreciate your time.